Erev Shabbat Shalom Rabotai. We're continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Yevamot. We're up to Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burchai, Israel ben Chana bat Miriam, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim lechaim, with the Refuah Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, and Mariana Miriam Chaya bat Tamara betor Shah Chulei Israel. When a man marries a woman, many of her relatives become forbidden to him, as we have learned previously in chapter 1, Mishnah 1, and chapter 4, Mishnah 7. The Mishnah now discusses the law regarding a woman who cohabited with a man outside of marriage. The Mishnah begins, Nosin ala nusav ala mfuta. One may marry the relatives of a woman who was violated or seduced by him, meaning he is forbidden only to the relatives of his wife, not to the relatives of a woman who was not his wife. Therefore, if he violated or seduced a woman, he is still permitted to marry her mother, her sister, or her daughter by another man. The Gemara learns this from the fact that when the verses speak of the forbidden relatives of a wife, they begin by saying that the man married his wife. Now, the Rav explains this represents the biblical law, the law from the Torah. The rabbis, however, forbade him to marry the relatives of the woman with whom he cohabited as long as she is alive. The reason is that if he married one of her relatives, he would be constantly in contact with her and might be tempted to continue his relationship with her since he is already comfortable with her. But since he married a relative, continuing his former intimacy with her would now violate the biblical prohibition against cohabiting with one's wife's relatives. Therefore, our Mishnah, which permits him to marry her relatives, is referring to where she has already died. However, the Mishnah says, "Ha'ones v'amfatel nisua chayav." One who violates or seduces the relatives of a woman he married is liable to the punishment of that erva prohibition. Meaning, the notes explain that in contrast to the rabbinic prohibition that we mentioned now, the biblical prohibition against marrying one's wife's relatives continues even after his wife's death, with the exception of his wife's sister, who is permitted to him after his wife dies, as we learned in chapter 4, Mishnah 13. The Mishnah now defines the law for the man's relatives. A man may marry a woman who was violated by his father, who was seduced by his father. She is not forbidden to him as his father's wife. Similarly, he may marry a woman who was violated by his son, or who was seduced by his son, and she is not forbidden to him as his daughter-in-law. Although the Torah prohibits cohabitation between a man and his father's wife, even if she is no longer married to his father, as it says in Vayikra chapter 18 verse 8, or between a man and his son's wife, even if she is no longer married to his son, as it says in Vayikra chapter 18 verse 15, these prohibitions do not extend to women with whom his father and son cohabited outside of marriage. And this law is also learned from the verses that we currently cited. Now, in contrast to the Mishnah's first case, even the rabbis did not forbid this. This is all according to the Tanakama, Rabbi Yehuda Oser, but Rabbi Yehuda, however, prohibits Banusat Aviv, Futat Aviv. He forbids this, and he forbids this in the case of the woman violated by his father or seduced by his father. But Rabbi Yehuda agrees that he is permitted to the woman with whom his son had relations. Now, the machloket, the dispute between the first Tan and Rabbi Yehuda, is based upon their interpretations of the following psukim in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 23, verse 3. A man shall not take the wife of his father, nor shall he uncover the robe of his father. Rabbi Yehuda understands the robe of his father to mean a woman who was violated or seduced by his father. The first Tana, however, interprets the verse in a different way. And the Rav does tell us, Ven lachak Rabbi Yehuda, the Halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And that is the end of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet now discusses the laws of Ibum and Chalitza as they relate to brothers who converted to Judaism. In the case of a female convert whose sons converted to Judaism with her, and one of the sons married and died without children, the remaining sons perform neither Chalitza nor Yibum with his widow, and she is free to remarry. Since the sons were born to non-Jewish parents and only afterward converted, they are not legally considered brothers at all, and the laws of Ibum and Chalitza do not apply to them. In Torah law, a convert to Judaism is considered like a newborn infant. He is not considered legally related to any of the relatives he had as a non-Jew. Since the sons themselves converted, they are no longer legally related to any of their previous relatives, including one another. Furthermore, the same law applies even if the first son's conception was not in sanctity, but his birth was in sanctity, meaning he was conceived before his mother's conversion and born after her conversion. While the second son's conception and birth were both in sanctity, meaning he was both conceived and born after his mother's conversion. The mother converted after she had conceived the first son, but before he was born. The father also converted. So the first son was conceived from non-Jewish parents and born from a Jewish mother, and the second son was both conceived and born from two Jewish parents. In this case too, even though both brothers were born after their mother's conversion, they are not legally considered related to their father because the first son was conceived before his mother converted. Therefore, neither Yibum nor Chalitza are required. In this case, the second son is indeed related to both his father and mother, since they were both Jewish when he was conceived and born. However, the first son, while related to his mother, is not related to the father because both parents were non-Jews at the time of his conception. Therefore, the two sons are legally considered brothers only to the mother, but not through the father. And the laws of Yibum and Chalitza apply only to brothers with the same father. Now, the commentaries add that a man's relationship to his child is determined by conception, not birth. Therefore, if the father was not Jewish at that time, his child is not legally related to him. A similar case, and so too is the law in the case of a non-Jewish slave woman whose sons were freed with her by their Jewish master, and one of the sons married and died without children, because they too are not legally considered brothers. Neither Yibum nor Chalitza is required, and the widow is free to remarry. A freed slave has the status of a convert and shares the same laws. He is considered unrelated to any of his previous relatives, as the Gemara discusses in page 62a, and the Rambam writes in Nechut Isurei Biyah, chapter 14, Halakha 11. Therefore, the laws of a freed slave woman and her sons are identical to the laws of a convert and her sons. And that is in Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody Shabbat Erev Shabbat Shalom. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.